by the Hurricane Emily in 2005. But the construction of these islands do have the opinions of public and environmentalists at odds with each other. Obviously, you can see why. On one hand, the collection and recycling of the bottles is obviously a good thing because they're being put to use. They're getting out of that whole landfill thing. But on the other hand, if there, which most likely will happen, to be another natural disaster, all of the materials could litter the Atlantic, adding to the problem rather than working towards a solution. But thankfully, the debris from his first island washed up on shore and was collected with minimum environmental damage. And now, with the new island, since it's come up, it's caught the attention of the Mexican authorities, and the government has designated his island an eco boat, which means he now has to comply with current boating regulations. And because he has to comply with those regulations, he has to purchase fire extinguishers, life ring buoys, and emergency kits. And you can imagine somebody who lives on an island, doesn't really have a job, can't come up with all that money. Rishi started a Kickstarter to raise funds to purchase the required equipment. And he's raised over $9,000. And the island has actually had more people come to help him build the island, which is pretty cool. Kind of a sense of community. The island has its own beaches, and it's an incredible piece of architecture if you ever see it. I'll definitely post links to the pictures and be sure to share them on social media in the upcoming weeks because, in my opinion, this is a really pretty amazing thing to do. I also wanted to share this story because he really is reusing these discarded plastic bottles and recycling materials to build his own shelter, and that alone I think is worthy of highlighting. A little ingenuity and hard work, and you could have your own island. For his sake and the sake of the ocean, I hope this one sticks around for a while and doesn't get blown away by some crazy natural disaster. And if it does, I hope he has something in place to keep all his stuff together rather than, I'd hate to see all that work be put in and then just blown away by a hurricane. So yeah, we're coming up on our this week's Limelight PPDPT, which is positive people doing positive things. And this week's PPDPT goes to Ruths Reusable Resources, a perfect pick for today's show because it falls right in line with the subject. This nonprofit was established over 20 years ago, and they are dedicated to reducing waste and connecting teachers to no-cost classroom materials. We are recycling all throughout this episode. I love it. Their mission is to ensure that all students from pre-K through high school have the basic supplies and creative tools for literacy, STEAM, and health educations through the environmentally conscious distribution of donated supplies. Each day throughout the school year, children in Maine attend school without the much needed pencils, papers, and other basic supplies, and at the same time, businesses throughout the United States dispose of these basic items, not even thinking about it. I know, especially in the military, once we hit a certain quarter or the end of the year, we had a budget. And if we didn't meet that budget or we had excess amount of money, we would throw out perfectly good desks, perfectly good chairs, perfectly good office supplies, equipment, because we had to spend it all. Because if we have too much money at the end of the year, we won't get the same funds for the next year or the funds will be cut. It's a really disgusting practice. I hope it stops. I don't know if it's still happening right now. I'm pretty sure it is. But regardless, there's a lot of people out there that could use these funds. And the military gets a disgusting budget anyway. So let's try to be a little bit conservative with those things. But this nonprofit transfers those unwanted supplies to children and their teachers, and it's been working. Since 1994, this Ruths Reusable Resources organization has given away more than $80 million worth of surplus furniture, paper, books, office supplies, and computers to Maine schools and other nonprofits in the area. So they specifically serve all of Maine and parts of New Hampshire. And they have a few programs like the Teacher Store program, where teachers can pick up supplies for use in their classrooms at no cost to the individual teacher. They have the backpack program, where over 5,000 backpacks are filled with school supplies every year and redistributed to the low-income students throughout Maine. And they have a computer relife program that takes computers and related technology from businesses and makes it available to schools and nonprofits for small handling fee. And finally, their recycling program. If anything, if they cannot reuse or repurpose something that they recycle, if it's possible, overall, there's very little that comes to them that is actually thrown away. So I chose this nonprofit because it falls in line perfectly with today's episode. As I said before, it recycles materials and it uses those materials for kids in their state to be prepared for school, and ultimately helps low-income families, those who need it the most. I love programs that like nonprofits like this because, if anything, they give the underserviced and underrepresented a chance to thrive, or at least even the playing field just a tad bit. So we're coming up to the end of the podcast. We had another packed show for you, full of positivity and environmentally friendly news. Some of my favorite news to cover. We covered how the Earth has the moon. It's one of the very special anomalies that the Earth has in a relationship with the moon by giving us these rare solar eclipses, and the moon is moving further away. It's freaking wild. We went over two brilliant men. One who created a company that develops buildings for low-income families, as well as give those same people in the community a chance to gain some much-needed experience to be able to get a competitive job down the line. And the other, he built his own island by reusing bottles and recyclable material, creating a clean and self-sustaining, energy-efficient home on the water. And lastly, we covered our nonprofit organization, the 3 R's, Ruths Reusable Resources, that helps the exact people we are focused on throughout this entire episode. Overall, full of recycling, sustainable, and eco-friendly materials. That's just straight up good news that I love covering. It's like I said, some of my favorite news. I hope it gives you guys a little positive outlook. So yeah, that's all we have for today. I hope this was a much needed break from the coronavirus related news. I know that type of news can get some fatigue and you don't want to hear about it. It's very real in today's world. It's a part of our everyday lives, like it or not. So I hope this was a little break for you. This, I would have to say, is one of my favorite, more interesting stories that I've shared by far, besides the guest episodes, but, if you have a story that you'd like to share, be sure to contact us and follow our social media platforms. We're on Twitter at LL Highlight, Facebook and Instagram at Limelight Highlight. And if you'd like to shoot us an email, you can do so at limelighthighlight@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast, be sure to subscribe, share, and follow. We're streaming everywhere you find podcasts, including Spotify, Google Play, and even YouTube. So be sure to give the podcast a rating and a review. It would be greatly appreciated, and it would help the popularity of this podcast, which would really in turn help me and maybe help some people that really need to hear some of this stuff. Be sure to come back next week for more positive news, and thank you always for listening. I actually was able to be on a episode of Stranger Dangerous. It's another podcast hosted by Anchor by a man named Johnny Jujoli. I hope I said his last name right. We had a great conversation where every week he talks to strangers. I happen to be this week's stranger. I don't know when he'll release it, but I'll keep you guys updated on that. We had a great conversation. Very raw, very authentic. I really appreciated everything that we had to talk about, and I appreciated the fact that he gave me a platform on his podcast. So be sure to check that out soon. Coming up, I'll keep you guys in the loop. Other than that, until next time, as always, be humble, be helpful, pay it forward, be the best you, and always remember, it ain't all bad. I'll see y'all next week. Peace.